going back to RNG, I think that, like I said, all those things that are worth consideration. Um, and yeah, there are times where RNG just feels really bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think the time that it feels the worst is not when it you randomly. I don't even think it's when you randomly get crit necessarily in games where you can get critically struck. I think the worst time is when something happens that creates an inescapable scenario for you. Like, I don't know if it can happen. Actually, probably it probably can happen at least with Elden Ring bosses. But when a boss layers mechanics in a way that you realize that to position around one, you have to get hit by the other, and to not get hit by that one, you have to position back in the first one. There is no winning because both of those fired off at the same time. Congratulations, you lose.
So
Sorry.
here's a scenario. All right, so at Firelink, you have all those draglings on the right side. Now, of course, you can always take your time and kill them all, but if you decide to run past them, you go up the stairs, but you don't take a left. You go straight to collect that little item. I think it's a is it a ring of sacrifice? I think maybe.
Yeah, the jump, to go under the bridge and then like squeeze, like sidle your way down the pillars
Well,
of the bridge, and yeah, it's a ring of
well,
sacrifice.
I meant above, where after
Oh, above,
if you
it's
go past the door where that rat is.
yeah, it's a soul of a lost undead.
Okay, no, you remember items a lot better than I can.
Bro,
Uh,
I have this game memorized front to back. It's weird, bruh.
yeah, I need to freshen up on that. I was thinking about just doing like a whole level analysis, finding every single item according to the guide, and finding all the enemies and clearing them out. But anyway, so imagine if you run past the steps without killing all the draglings, and you collect that soul, and so all of a sudden all these draglings are coming after you, and they somehow didn't fall off, and then you just get pummeled. Is that bad RNG from the game or bad RNG from you?
I think, well, there's no real randomness to be to be seen there. I guess the only randomness there is
Yeah,
how the hell did those draglings let you get past?
yeah.
Um,
Well, I do
that's
it all the
that's the only
time.
random. Yeah, that's like the only randomness to be had there. But you were shown the threat. These are the undead. I don't remember what the basic ones. I don't think they were draglings. That's demon souls. I forgot what they were called. The basic undead
I
in
just call
Dark
them
Souls one.
draglings,
Yeah,
whatever.
that works pretty well as a name. So you are shown that there's, I think, six draglings that are guarding the way. One of them has a shield and spear. One of them has fire bombs. One of them's got an axe. One of them has a short sword. I think two of them have a short sword.
Hmm.
Uh, this is what you are facing. If you run past them, there is a narrow walkway.
Yep.
We will let you do the math of what's going to happen if you want to try that. So I hope your weapon is able to do a lot of vertical attacks, because you're going to plink off the wall if you try to fight them up there.
Yep.
So I wouldn't even, I don't think that would really be necessarily an RNG thing,
Yep.
because like Dark Souls is actually really good at doing that, where it lets you dig your own grave a
Hmm.
lot of the time. There's I think Demon Souls, one of the didn't have aggro walls for enemies, and in the Swamp of Despair, or whatever it was called, the Swamp of Sorrows. I almost called it Swamp of Despair. Wow, the Swamp of Sorrows, the very first one, the Valley of Plague or something like that. You if you run past every enemy in the level, whatever you drew aggro from, there's a bridge at the very end where there's the really big birdmen. There's one of the really big ones who blocks the bridge entirely, and you pretty much either have to get lucky and dodge around him or kill him. So if you try to sit there and have an extended fight with him, you will have a turnaround and you will get a brief 2, 3, 5 seconds of looking back and going, oh, I really screwed the pooch this time, didn't I? As you watch dozens of enemies flood onto the bridge behind you. You
Mm.
dug your own grave there. You knew what you were doing. Enjoy your consequences. There's the best phrase I could use for what you've described. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
Exactly. I like the in the catacombs in Dark Souls 3. I love gathering all the skeletons. There's like probably 20 skeletons you can get chasing after you, and you get them on that bridge. You turn around and you snap the rope on the bridge, and they all fall down.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think that uh that places where yeah, I think so like but back to where I was saying with randomness though
Mm-hmm.
is I think that bosses on you can tell me if there's any bosses. I'm trying to think of a few that I've experienced that with where layered mechanics can be exceptionally unlucky. I know it actually
Yeah.
happens a lot in MMOs like WoW. There's been a couple bosses throughout the years. I think they've gotten better about it over the years. But there are some very unlucky combinations of mechanics where it's like, oh, if the dragon is doing this fire breath on 1/3 of the room, but there's an AoE that's going to cover the other 1/3 of 2/3 of the room,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, you're dead. Sorry, we rolled some dice and decided you die. Uh, and so that's like I guess where bad RNG because where it's like, well, you want me to do something, but I can't do something. That is bad RNG. Or of course, lacking game clarity is like lacking clarity in the RNG. I think is another big part where you go from the zone of good RNG to bad RNG. So, like you said, randomness and boss patterns is good because yes, the boss when you see them, wind back and pull their arms together, they're gonna, when you see Melina, pull her sword back, she's about to waterfowl you. Get your dancing shoes on.
Mm-hmm.
But if imagine if all of a sudden she was able to like put down a zone that of like fire that engulfed the whole arena but a straight line in front of her, and then she could potentially waterfowl while there was fire all around the arena.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do?
Yeah.
You just die. And so that would be horrible. You're like, well, what did you want me to do? That is where the lacking clarity comes in. I think lacking game clarity is like one of the worst sins a game can commit.
Yeah.
Because I think difficulty, you can make a game as difficult as you want, but make it clear what you're losing to, and that
Yes.
is nine times out of ten that will fix most bad design. I think Riot in League of Legends has gotten really bad about this lately, where there's some champions you'll die to and it'll say, "Oh yeah, this did this much damage." You're like, "Okay, how do I see that coming?" You don't. It just happens. Oh yeah, it's like a frame. Like you have like 2 frames to respond to it. Could I have more? No, no. Uh, and so there are some things you can get good at, really good at predicting. But as I have worded it to my friends, you shouldn't have to be a Jedi to beat certain things in any game.
Yeah.
That is the best way I can put it.
This a good example for that is Manus, the dark magic attacks. You have 3 of them. You got the one that circles around you, and you got the one that's a spray, a close range spray, and the other one's rain. Now, these attacks are not well telegraphed, in my opinion. They look very similar, and they're very sudden. So basically, so
And their
they're
dark magic in an all black arena, that also doesn't help.
well, it's not too bad visually. It's not
Yeah,
visually
purple.
jarring like some attacks in Elden Ring, like Malekith. Malekith is very visually jarring, and there's one attack from the Draconic Tree Sentinel that's also jarring, but it's just one attack. Um, so it doesn't really look that bad in my opinion. So these dark magic attacks, you can get the pendant and just nullify all of it. But if there's a possible way, when I was practicing Manus for the Soul Level 1 run, there's something telling me, something telling me that there was a very possible way to avoid these magic spells. So
Mhm.
I just kept at it, and I already knew how to avoid the circling dark magic spell. You just had to simply run towards Manus because it doesn't go all the way to him, it eventually vanishes.
Mhm.
And so the spray was my biggest obstacle, which eventually led to the rain being my biggest obstacle. And so my strategy was to plan on that spray happening every time. If I saw his staff raise, I'm like, okay, I need to put in my brain that he's going to do the spray. But so if he all of a sudden had the circling magic spell, I'm like, okay, well, I'm already close to him, so I can just take care of that. I can get a lot of hits in. But if he does the rain became the most problematic because I had to kind of run a little bit forward and then back. And I wasn't really sure if I found the right consistency for that still. I don't know if I got lucky or I actually found a good strategy. I think it was just one of those moments where like, okay, I'm close to getting it done and I'm not going to start over. I'm not doing a no hit run or anything like that. But and so the
Mhm.
spray, interesting thing about the spray is when it happens, you got to act fast. You got to roll. Sometimes I incidentally just jump out of the way, and it worked
Mhm.
consistently. And so I'm not really expecting everybody to do that because it's a very specific way, and it just does. Sometimes it doesn't even feel intentional doing it that way. It's almost like the game's telling you, "Hey, use this item we use in the game. I mean, use this item that we put in the game to nullify those magic spells." And then you, but if you're stubborn like I am and don't want to use that item, and you just find a very iframe perfect bypass. So, but it's not RNG if there's a consistent way to do it. So
Mhm.
this is kind of leading into bad game design. But would you even consider that bad game design if the
Uh,
developers intentionally put an item in there to nullify it?
Um, I think that I guess I would call that Band-Aid design,
Mm-hmm.
where they were like, okay, this I could see where this would be frustrating, but we want the boss to have this power, so we will put a Band-Aid that the player can find, so it won't get overly frustrating while the boss can still look cool. Is kind of what I would call
Okay.
that silver pendant. But I know that attack. I rarely get the silver pendant because I was thinking back and was like, oh yeah, I forgot the silver pendant exists. I've beat Manus like at least 2 or 3 times,
Mm-hmm.
throughout various playthroughs. Um, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's a thing. I should probably think about using that in my next playthrough, and then I completely forget about it again. But I guess that it's um I guess that attacks like that I don't necessarily think because he does have the staff raise, and I think that the contingency like if the player makes contingency plans,
Mm-hmm.
that is an okay form of game design. I think that things that have similar telegraphs are kind of like okay, it's a little it can be a little iffy where when you get into the design space. But I think that if it has a similar telegraph, it gets the player to start to create contingency plans.
Mm-hmm.
So like you said, you would get close if you saw the ring outside, awesome, and you just start wailing away on Manus. But if you saw him start to put his arm back to do the big swipe of magic,
Yes.
then you would get up to a run and do your big jump and roll thing, which actually looks really cool, dodging some attacks
Mm-hmm.
when you see something and you just barely jump at the last second. Oh, it looks so
Did
cool.
you see my footage for Menace? Have you seen it yet?
I have not gotten to see that yet. I was out and about for most of the
Oh,
day.
okay.
Um, but yeah, I think that um, when you're getting into the realm of like uh, you know difficult game design and bad game design are not the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I am very firmly in the camp that bad game design is either unclear what the player should be doing or could be doing. Not, it doesn't always need to be told to you, hey, when he does this, immediately do this, and that's the answer. But there should be some like it should be semi-intuitive where it's like, okay, that makes sense. Like the old adventure games, like, oh, get a cat out of a tree, so I need a ladder. Oh, the ladder doesn't work. Oh, I have to get a gun and shoot down the tree branch. What?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of logic where it's just like that's not intuitive. But I think that intuitive counterplay is a big part of good game design, and fun counterplay is a good part of game design. Things that rule of cool, if it looks cool, there's a good chance that it actually feels fun to do when you're playing against it. There's a kind of a design concept that I, ironically enough, learned from Riot Games on one of their dev blogs about as with and against. And that is, not all of this applies to single player games, but quite a bit of it does. So when you're designing a game, or a character in a game, it should feel fun to play as. If you're the person on it, it should feel good to play. If you're playing with it on your team, it should be good to have on, feel good to have on your team. You're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'm glad that they picked that. It's never a bad time to pick them. And against, and most people are like, well, there's no good way to design against. Everybody hates dying. Yeah, everybody hates dying, but there's times where you can die and you're like, that was my fault. Where you can at least reasonably say, oh yeah, that I screwed up. I saw the telegraph. I should have done this. I knew I had to do this, and I just completely misplayed. I died. That is on me. And then there's times where you're like, oh, this guy just appeared out of nowhere. I had no way of seeing him coming, and he dealt 4,000 damage in 2 seconds. Okay, that's I guess that's my fault. I should have not left the base, obviously.
Thank you for listening to this podcast clip. If you want to watch more of the podcast, the full podcast is in the link in the description, along with my guest channel name. And if you would like to guest in a future podcast, please contact me and we shall talk so we can discuss many, many topics, more to come. Other than that, have a glorious day.